Some of the spending pressures that you outlined in the budget, the inflation pressures that we're also experiencing, how ambitious do you expect to be to pull back on spending and aggregate demand in the economy in this budget to assist the Reserve Bank? And are there particular broad areas that you're going to be focusing on? You talk about rorts and waste, but what areas are you actually broadly talking about?
Well, first of all, that work's ongoing and it's not completed. But as I said before, and Katie and I and the ERC colleagues and others are working very hard, especially now that we've got the Jobs and Skills Summit under our belt, to go through the budget line by line. I'm not going to preempt where those savings will come from, except to say we've made it clear that in some of these discretionary funds, we're not getting value for money or bang for buck from some of the ways that our predecessors went about allocating from some of those funds, and so that will be an obvious focus. We took to the election some billions of dollars in budget improvements, so you can expect to see them in the budget in some form as well. But in terms of managing aggregate demand, I think we have to be realistic here as well. I see our task in the budget is not making the work of the Independent Reserve Bank harder. I don't think that there is an opportunity to cut so savagely into aggregate demand in the way that you're describing. You know, I see the task as to not make it harder on the demand side. There's a big task. I like to focus on where we can make a meaningful difference, and I think the meaningful difference that governments can make is on the supply side. We've got these big supply side challenges. Our supply chains are bent and broken in many areas. We've got labour and skills shortages. This is all pushing up the cost of living. There are elements of the global challenge that we don't have any agency or influence over. There are elements of the Reserve Bank's work that we don't want to interfere in. My focus is on the supply side, as I've said before. Shane.
Treasurer, the ABS estimates that the cumulative cost to GDP from COVID at $158 billion. The budgets ran up around $200 billion in deficit. The Reserve Bank created north of $450 billion, and God knows what the states spent themselves. Was it worth it?
Well, I think inevitably when you've got the kind of economic shock which is posed and presented by something like COVID, governments need to step in. I think clearly not every dollar of support that was provided during different phases of the pandemic was well targeted or well spent, and we've made our views known, for example, when it comes to wastage in JobKeeper and other programs. But overall, the principle that governments step in when times are toughest, I think, is broadly shared. What matters is how effectively and how efficiently you do that. We've made our views clear about some of those programs. I also think it's worth remembering, it's too easily forgotten, I think, including deliberately by some. People want to pretend that all of these challenges in the economy and the budget are just a consequence of COVID-19. I mean, the debt was already, our predecessors had already doubled the debt before COVID. We had long-standing issues with productivity and wages and living standards and all of these things even before any of us had ever heard of coronavirus, and so I think we need to remember that too.